going. So hello everyone, welcome to JSFP Live number 2. I'm Mark McCurgo and I'm the editor of the Journal of Solution Focused Practices. And we run these sessions every so often to allow the authors of papers published in the journal to come and briefly present their work and engage in a conversation with anyone who wants to show up. And today we're very excited to have Dominik, Godat and Elfie Czerny, both microanalysts as well as solution-focused practitioners. And they're going to be talking about their paper, which is about a microanalysis following an SF leadership training. And so that it's a juicy paper. If you haven't read it, do go and have a look at it. It's on the journal website, of course, free to read and download, as everything is on the journal. What's going to happen is this. Dominik and Elfie are going to make a short summary of their paper. They're not going to present the whole thing because that would probably take most of the hour. And you can read the paper anyway, but they're going to remind us about the key points and what's in it for about 10 to 15 minutes max. Then we'll go into small groups to talk about what struck us about the paper and what questions we have for them. About 10 minutes for that, and then we'll come back together and we'll have a conversation with Dominik and Elfie about their paper. So if everyone is here, everyone who's coming, let's get cracking. So, Dominik and Elfie, welcome to JSFP Live.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Mark, for organizing that, and also thank you for the JSFP for enabling that, and for hello to everyone who is here today. Yeah, Dominik and I are really excited to talk with you about our paper, and are really curious about your questions already, or whatever came up for you if you had the chance to read it. And we will briefly talk about a bit of what made us do this study, and then also show you the results and things that struck us. So that's our idea for the next 10 minutes. So a few years ago, Peter de Jong, Sarah Smock-Jordan, Jennifer Gerving, and Sarah Healing did a study which was called something along the line Building Miracles in Dialogue. And in this study, they compared conversations that were studied by Janet Bavelas, Sarah Healing, and Jennifer Gerving, where they looked at getting acquainted conversations and operationalized calibration, which is basically the thing we do every 5 to 7 seconds in a conversation when we nod, look at each other, and coordinate each other in our dialogue to make sure we have enough understanding to continue the dialogue. And this 2017 paper was the first time when this calibration was really operationalized in a way that you can see it and how you can see it. And in this paper, they came up with interactive functions. Dominik will talk about that a bit later. And they looked at those getting acquainted conversations. And Peter de Jong and Sarah Smock-Jordan, Jennifer Gerving, and Sarah Healing, a few years later, looked at an excerpt from a miracle dialogue. So where they asked the miracle question in a therapeutic setting, and they looked at how did they co-construct meaning moment by moment, and also looked at those interactive functions again. And what they noticed was that there was a shift so in the interactive functions, when there was this professional therapeutic conversation compared to getting acquainted conversations. And that made us really curious, because we had this idea that when leaders, and we do leadership trainings at the University of Applied Science in Lucerne, that when they come, they often would do, our idea was we often would do something very similar to getting acquainted conversations. And after the training, we, of course, hope they would do more of what a professional solution-focused conversation is, which would be something similar to the building miracle in dialogue conversation. And that, yeah, so this idea struck us. And so we said, let's have a look. And in our trainings, we always work with video recordings. So not forever, but for many years now, because video has one big advantage. Especially when both people are on screen at the same time, you can observe the interaction and you can see all the subtle things, the small things that are going on in a dialogue moment by moment, when we nod, when we say aha, when we open our eyes, when we comment on something, when we pick up words that the other person says and leave out other words. So all those things can not be observed if we only have a transcript or if we only have an audio recording. So looking at and learning from interactions makes only sense if we have both people at the same time. So not looking at what one person does, but what two people do together in a conversation. And especially if we have as much information as those people have in the moment when they have their conversation. And the best thing we have so far is video.
Yes, I shared in the chat, I shared our presentation that I'll open now. We will not talk about everything, but just everything in there for you also to take home. What we noticed when we did that, we analyzed, maybe I can show this here. We analyzed those conversations in our specialist course, Solution Focused Leadership at the University of Applied Sciences in Lucerne. And we chose we always make baseline conversations without any SF input, where people just come together and they support each other in a supportive leadership conversation. And then we have training, and then we do a second and or third conversation where they can see the things that they do differently now. So we had the idea that if we compared day 1 to day 3, that there should be a significant shift in those conversations. And we chose 3 participants without any formal solution-focused or communicative trainings. Because some people come with the coaching background or social work background, and they're trained in having conversations like that, but they weren't trained at all. They just had those 3 days of training with us. And what we noticed, and this is not a big surprise, but it was nice to see for us. Maybe when we talk about those functions, there are 15 functions, and the functions, they were developed for calibration, because the hypothesis back then, that is now confirmed several times, was that we have to, a calibration, a 3-step process where you introduce new information as step 1, then you confirm, the other person confirms that, and then the first person who introduced the content confirms that the other person confirmed. So a 3-step process. And the question was, do all the information that are new need to be calibrated or not? So they came up with functions and had hypotheses about which functions need to be calibrated and which ones don't need to be calibrated. For example, if I say something and you nod and I nod, does the second nod need to be calibrated again or not? Is a question here. So they came up with those functions, and they start with requesting, so kind of asking a question, contributing, just talking, proposing. That's a function that we in solution focused practice have quite often, where we navigate the conversation. For example, I could ask, can I ask you a very special question, for example? So I navigate the dialogue. It goes to attending, for example. It's kind of those listener responses. Or if I confirm something, it's confirming. If I accept something, it's accepting. So those functions were studied. And we had several hypotheses. On one hand, if after solution-focused training, that the leaders ask more questions. And that's quite normal. If you do solution-focused training, that was confirmed, and they nearly doubled their questions. And with that, it's number 1, number 4 are kind of correlated. With that, the conversation partner, increased their contributing. So they contributed much more content in those conversations, of course, because they also were asked. With that, also leaders reduced their contributing, so they didn't give as many advices or said things, but asked more questions. And the leaders attending, so all those listener responses increased. With the partners, conversation partners attending, responses decreased because the conversation partner doesn't have to listen to as much as before when conversation part when the facilitator or the leader just talks. So these were the five supported hypotheses. And if we look at the changes that we saw, then we see several things that are very interesting. On the one hand, those 5 that I just mentioned, but we also see that in conversation 1, so in a normal supportive leadership conversation without any solution-focused input, both participants contribute in a significant way. Here, the conversation partner contributed 146 times, while the leader contributed 78 times. But still, very kind of it's more symmetrical, also with the attending, and also in some other functions was more symmetrical than in the second conversation. And the second conversation, you see clearly that's a very asymmetrical conversation where only the solution-focused leader asked the questions, that the contributions decreased significantly by the leader, and the conversation partner could talk more, and also attending. So here the attending of the conversation partner decreased significantly. And if we are, of course, this would be the hypothesis that we have if we train solution-focused people, but it's nice to have that confirmed. And if we compare that to the results in the Building Miracle Dialogue study that Elfie just mentioned, then we also see kind of this change here in a getting acquaintance dialogue that's more or less symmetrical. Both partners ask similar amount of questions, both contribute more or less the similar amount of content, to a very asymmetrical conversation. And asymmetrical here means good in a solution-focused way, because we have one person being able to contribute much more than the other, and the other asking more questions, listening more. That's what we would hope to achieve in a training like that.
One thing I think that's really important to highlight when it comes to this study, we didn't look at the kind of questions. So we didn't analyze. We obviously looked at that, but we didn't analyze that in a scientific way. So we cannot make any assumptions about the quality of questions. But as you might imagine, people asked in the first part, when they asked questions, it was often information gathering questions, or questions with hidden advice, rather than open questions where they are really curious in a solution-focused way to learn more about the person's expertise or the preferred future or what works. And that that's something we saw, but we didn't analyze. So the function itself doesn't, the interactive functions themselves don't say anything about more or less solution focus, but really just more or less asking, attending, listening. So yeah, that was the focus.
One interesting aspect for us was also to define an utterance, and that might sound very funny, But to analyze what is said, you need to define what is an utterance. When does what I say stop, or when does it go on? And in a face-to-face dialogue, an utterance is defined by the interactive response of the other person. So if I say something and the other person nods, and I see that, the utterance stops. So the utterances were very short. It might have been only 3 words, and the person nods, and I nod again, and then I go on with the question. So it was never a full question or a full statement, but they're very short elements. We had around 1,000 utterances in those very few minutes of conversation.
Yeah, and a few things probably about what changed for us thanks to the study. So as we looked at one of our trainings, one thing we noticed, and that surprised us because we had this hypothesis that people would use more formulations as well. The formulation means I pick up the exact in solution focus positive content the other person said, and either just summarize it or put parts of that in the next question. And we had the idea that that the leaders would use more formulations in their conversations. This didn't happen, and that was one thing that also surprised us and made us look a little closer. On the one hand, I mean, we have a hypothesis that probably in a 5-minute conversation you don't use as much formulations, but that would be the easy way out. The other way, so the other thing that we now tried and experimented with was addressing the formulations even more in the teaching, and we spend more time talking about the listen, select, build process and how we moment by moment can use that. We did that before, but we added a few new exercises where people can really train and experience that more.
Mm.
Yeah, so that for sure is one thing. And then the other thing that became even clearer to us was like the importance of really looking not only at questions in the dialogue, obviously, but looking at the co-construction. And I mean, I guess many of you know that people come to trainings and ask for the next tool, and and then let's see how we can then apply this tool of solution focus to our employees. And and this is something where our whole narrative is much more clearer about not teaching tools, but engaging in the conversation and learning how to meaningfully and in a solution-focused way engage in a conversation, navigate a conversation moment by moment. And this means that we really look closely at listening, for instance, and how our listening supports a conversation. And not only the questions, but then also not the listening and the questions, but what we do, how this plays together moment by moment. And in our trainings, we invite people to look very closely at the way how they co-construct meaning through looking with different elements of microanalysis at their conversations, and that with which they recorded on video again, because what we think we do doesn't always connect to what we really do. Yeah, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much, Dominik and Elfie. Right, so we're going to go into small groups now, 3 or 4 to a group. You have 10 minutes, so say hello and introduce yourselves and be interested in the other people in your group, and then share what brought you today to talk about this paper, what struck you about the paper and the presentations, and what questions do you have. And then in 10 minutes' time, we'll reassemble back here and we'll have a chance to ask the questions and engage in conversation with Dominik and Elfie. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms now. And I'm just going to shuffle people around a bit, actually. Let me just, sorry. A couple of people just dropped out at the end of the presentation there, which is a shame. So let's just shuffle those around. Okay, so I'm opening the rooms now. Please join them, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. So thanks, everyone. I hope you've had some interesting conversations there. So now we have the chance for questions and conversation with Dominik and Elfie. So perhaps if you have a question, maybe you could put it in the chat in the first instance so we can see what questions there are, and then I can invite you to speak and we can get things going. So just a moment's thinking about what questions we have. And if you'd like to put them in the chat, that's good. Oh, and Dominik's been noting the questions in his group already, which is excellent. Okay, well, I mean, Dominik, do you want to start, while people are thinking, do you want to start with the first questions from your group? What happened between the sessions and so on? That would be good.
Yeah. Yeah, the question was what happened between the sessions, because there was a first recording and a second recording and a training. So were all participants joining, etc. was the question. And it was a typical course. It's a 7-day course. I think we had 14 participants. And the first module is 3 days, where they learn how to engage in solution-focused conversation. And they all took part of that. They all went through the same exercises and little bits of practices, and for especially also analyzing their baseline conversation with microanalysis and looking at what questions they asked, how they responded to what was said, what formulations they used, how they listened, etc. So we had 3 days of different inputs and training in our course.
Yes.
Then a question for Elfie: what kind of leaders took part?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very, so that those in our leadership courses, we have a very broad spectrum of people from different leadership positions, from CEOs to team managers, and and from also a variety of fields: banking industry, so financial industry, mental health, social work. So it's really a big mixture of profit, non-profit organizations, and that's usually works very well.
And what is really cool, these are
sorry, and just to add, there are sometimes a few who have already experience with solution focus, for instance, from social work. And there are also a lot of people who don't have any prior solution focused training or even heard about that. Yeah.
And it's the cool thing, it's not part of any other program. So they purely join because they want to learn solution focus, how to apply solution focus in their leadership conversations or leadership interactions. And it was a few years ago, was part of another master program where we had some participants that just needed 5 points. And now it's nice that we just have people that are really, really interested in learning solution focus.
There is a question: how would the participants observe the difference? What is meant by, so what, can you say something about that?
Yeah, maybe Marcus was your question. Or no, it was
actually, I think it was my question.
Yeah.
No, it's just, I mean, as a solution-focused practitioners, it's just that we have the mindset that the change is for the better. But some people would actually like a leader to maybe give more directing or less questions. So I was just wondering if it's part of the microanalysis to how would people actually see the change, and did they actually find it helpful in the conversation? So basically, was the conversation seemed as more profitable the second time than the first time?
I wonder if these are two questions actually. Because one thing, so what we don't see with microanalysis is if a conversation is better or not. And that's it. It's really with this lens, we can look at what's happening in the conversation, and but we cannot say this was more or less useful. What we hear our participants say that is that they really understand better how to navigate the conversation, which is not only asking the questions, but also really, and then responding is again a difficult word if you look from an interactional view at what we are doing, because it's happening much faster. But they for sure say they know much better how to react if a person says something that's negative for them, and they know how much better to listen and not to nod or to nod, and because they know better what elements they are listening for, like things that the other person wants, things that are important for the other person, things that already work. So that's what our participants say. And they also looked at those conversations. So we have in the training, we used the first video recording, and actually for 1.5 days almost, they just look at different elements in their conversation, like their questions, and then seeing, okay, if I ask this question, what answers do I get? And are they within this, we call it the answering spectrum of the question? And where are they within the answering spectrum and where are they not? And how can I play with that? Then we look at listening or at the formulations. So how do I refer to what the person said earlier? What words do I pick up? What words don't I pick up? What do I change in what the other person says? So they have a lot of ideas of what things influence their moment by moment co-construction, and can use that more deliberately. If that is better or not, that's always depending on the conversation. So this is something that we also cannot learn with microanalysis, but what we can learn is to see what am I doing in my conversations and how is this useful? And then see, and then how can I learn from that for my next conversation? And not with a question as a tool, but with knowing how to navigate, how to listen for positive content, or how to, if someone says, I don't want this anymore, okay, you don't want this, what would be there instead? And of course, we can train that without microanalysis, but with microanalysis, it becomes more clearer that this is not just one question, but things we do moment by moment. I'm not sure how this answers the question, but
I think one of the elements is also it's only 5 minutes, and some use it as a start into a solution-focused 1 hour conversation. Some really try to make use of those 5 minutes and also end the conversation. And so it also depends on what conversation happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got some more questions coming up in the chat. John Brooker of London has a couple. John, would you like to ask your questions, please? You can unmute yourself if you like.
Sorry, I have a bit of a cough, so I didn't want to keep coughing while you were talking. There you go. What would happen? Sorry, I don't know if it's what would happen, but what are you able to analyze post-training? Because we were, Deborah and I were kind of the same mind. It'd be really interesting to understand 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 months later, what is it still the same graph? number two, or has it gone back to number one? And yeah, so that was the question really.
We haven't done it. We would have loved to do it.
Well, one of the elements is very easy to have a session record, 5-minute session recorded in a training, but to have a real conversation recorded in everyday life is something different, and we didn't dare to ask that from our students yet, but it would be cool to see.
And we had so that was not in the realm of this this study, but we once had a participant who had the opportunity to record real 5-minute conversations with his employees, and that was really cool to see. And what that was, so we didn't analyze that. And so just to give, I'm not sure if we mentioned that, but the 6 5-minute conversations took us about 1.5 weeks full-time work to just annotate. So it's really a lot of hours that go into analyzing. So yeah, and it would be a really cool study to do.
Sounds like work for AI or something, doesn't it?
So Wouter has.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to come to the point from cross-cultural coach in a minute, but Wouter has a question about to what extent is the amount of attending and listening versus talking and contributing in the conversation an indicator of being solution focused? And I think it's a good question. I suspect it's not a straightforward answer.
Yes, it's not at all. You can attend very well and listen very well in a problem-focused sense. You can ask very problem-oriented questions, and it's not a sign of solution focus. Of course, when we looked at the conversation, we annotated them and we categorized them, but we also listened, of course, to the questions, and we were really happy with the questions that they asked. So, but it's not part of the study. We didn't do a content analysis. We just saw that they asked more questions compared to before, where they said more things or contributed more, or they also listened more while the other person, of course, if the other person is talking more, you are listening more, you do give more signs of listening. But it's not the quality of the questions or quality of the solution focused conversation is not part of the study.
So,
but what we can see is that for sure the conversation partner, so the coachee, employee, whatever, the colleague in this case, did much more of the talking content-wise. And so that it's more a facilitation, and that they did that more deliberately, kind of that can be seen. And I think that's probably still not solution focused, but something we hope to see in people when they do solution focused conversations.
All right. Yeah. Beverly has an observation. Do you want to come in, Beverly, and talk
Sure.
about supervising?
I was just talking about that. It came up with my group, which is I supervise students. I don't train groups, and they're all trained in CBT. They come from the university, and they all have to have a supervision with an active psychologist in the community. So they've learned CBT, and then they're introduced for the first time to me to learn about solution focus. And one of my observations, which really this just reinforces that, is I realize all the time they never learn how to talk to the clients. They learn how to teach CBT and how to have conversations, but they never learn about conversing. I guess I would call it co-construction. And it's kind of a revelation to them when they start having conversations and asking questions and waiting for the answers and not having things prepared in advance and moving, and just it's kind of blows their mind that the conversation is the therapy, not the application of CBT. So this just is an observation. It's an anecdotal study of one per kid, but it really reinforces what you're talking about because it is specifically SF that they are doing because they're talking to me, so I know the quality of the questions, but I don't study it or anything. It's just observational.
Yeah,
I
thank
think
you for highlighting that. I think that's really cool to hear also. So, and yeah.
I think it goes right back to the beginning of solution focus, where trained therapists did those conversations and they knew how to talk to their clients, but they never really described those elements. They just described the other elements that are special to their way of doing it, and not much about having a normal conversation with a client. And still, we don't see that often in solution-focused books. It's more about the questions, for example, about the formulation or what to pick up or not pick up, and not about those other elements. And maybe more in therapy field than in
Yeah.
other fields. Yeah.
I just want to say I'm familiar with with the 1001 questions that they just put up in there. That is also very helpful, but it's true. Having a stance allows you to talk to people without having a technique, you know?
Mhm. That's
Yeah,
all.
Well,
and
thank you guys. It's great to hear you talk about your project. I really appreciate it.
thank you. And I think what you just no, I lost my but what you just say really amplifies that we are not teaching tools, but we are teaching how to engage with each other in a meaningful way or to interact with each other in a meaningful way. And there's a huge difference. And we can learn that. Even
Yes.
it's not, you cannot only learn tools, but you can learn how to engage in a conversation and how to co-construct meaning moment by moment. And I think that's something that we are excited because our study just amplifies that for us,
Okay.
that you can teach and learn that.
Thank
Marco,
you.
sorry.
So yeah, Marco has his hand up. Hello, Marco.
So yeah, yes, I agree totally with Beverly. Me too. I've learned solution focus, and what I check is the level of curiosity as indicator, the genuine curiosity. So the question is, how do you felt? What do you see about the presence of the new leaders, and if curiosity or other element instead of confirmation, questioning, and so on? So if there is element of presence that you can smell, of course it's difficult to measure, but you can smell it, you can recognize.
Lovely question.
The good thing with microanalysis, we have a video and we can see what is the person doing. So we would need to translate your word presence into doing. How would you see presence? You would maybe see it through a nod, for example. You maybe see it through a pause or whatever it is. So if we have the kind of how to say that, the operationalization of presence, then we could have a look at that, and then we could look at what can translate the word present, big word presence, into those everyday interactions. And I think a big part is the attending, because there you see what we usually call presence. If someone reacts to the other person, kind of responsiveness to the other person.
Yeah, and we distinguish between specific and generic listener responses. And one thing we notice, and that's what people tell us when they, or our students or participants tell us when they look at their conversations, that they notice that they nod at different times. Because so talking about curiosity, if you are really interested to, to get the problem, you will nod at different times in the conversation. You will open your eyes in a different moment in the conversation, usually when the person tells something, that's the problem. Okay, now I get it. Okay, tell me more about it. And when you're interested in what the person wants or what's working for the person, you would nod at different times. And you would probably do a specific listener response, which is something like okay, oh wow, at a different time. And that's something we can observe in the videos. And that was not in this group where we did this analysis, but in the previous year we had a participant that was really cool. He transcribed his first conversation, and every time his conversation partner said something positive, so something that he wants more of or that works for him, he didn't react. He didn't even transcribe that, even though we asked them to describe each and every word. And then when we looked at the conversation, and in the transcript, he had like the negative content and then bracket, point, bracket, and then the negative content again. And that was something that fundamentally shifted for him, as he told us after the course, that he was really listening in a different way. And that's something you can observe on the video.
Yeah. So Nadia has put in an interesting question in the chat. Nadia, would you like to ask your question, please? Unmute.
My English is so bad, I'm sorry, but
It's
you
fine.
mentioned that leaders seem to learn. Oh, I can't do it. I would be interested in getting to know how you were surprised in a way, and then you added some exercises. So are there any exercises you were really hopeful that they could make a difference?
So I think you referred to what we talked about, the formulations earlier.
Exactly.
And the formulating was one of the things we noticed that people didn't do more. And yeah, thank you for
and maybe it's also the reintroducing, so taking something that was said before and reintroducing it into the conversation or reiterating. So just picking something up that the person just said, and it all kind of fits together in the same category.
So what we did in the training where we did the analysis was that we introduced this idea of formulations and what this is, namely to pick up, like summarizing, active listening. There are very different names for what is summarized under formulations. And we introduced the idea of listen, select, build, which is an idea from Peter de Jong and Insoo Kim Berg, where they say, okay, we listen for positive content, so for what is positive from the other person, and then we take the exact words ideally and either summarize or ask the next question. So build our next element in the dialogue on that. And this is something that we introduce, and then we also introduce the idea. So they usually transcribed one of the answers and the question, and an answer and a question of this 5-minute conversation, and then we invite them to have a look at the words they picked up, at the words they left out, at the words they altered. And they look at that in their conversation. And before we do that, we also watch a video where we do that together with the participants. And what we did now, we added another layer to that. So we now look at the video, we have them look in their own conversations, but before they go into their own conversations, we also do a demo coaching where we do a stop. So what we basically did with the video, that we also do like a little stop coaching, but then we do that live as well, and where they really see how the dialogue unfolds moment by moment when they do that.
You have to pick up something that the other person said with their follow-up question. Yeah.
So we've just got a couple of Bev, did you have a?
I just wanted to know whether you followed up to see what difference it made for them when they went back to their organizations. No. Okay. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting, wouldn't it? And finally, Marco asked about what's about your surprise and what changed between you after this project. It would be a nice place to go and finish.
Well, we had some exciting conversations, and I think it's yeah, not even. I mean, it was lovely to do that together. And whenever Dominik and I do something together, it makes a positive difference.
I think one thing that changed, because when you look at how people describe solution focus, you have those people who describe it as a question-based approach. You have those people that describe it as a listening-based approach. We would describe it as an interactional approach right now, but we saw that the participants contribute a lot to the conversation, and we thought of how would you formulate solution focus as a contributing based approach by the client and look
Yeah.
at it from this kind of view. And I think these conversations we always have, these open up new ideas of how to do things and or how to look at things. And I think that's the interesting thing for us.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Kati, who just shown up at maybe an hour late.
Yes.
But anyway, it's been recorded. I'm now going to stop the recording to